Hello, good evening, everyone. Welcome to our webinar, Building Your Family with Medically Assisted Reproduction and Surrogacy. Thank you for joining us. I hope that you will enjoy tonight's webinar and that you will get a lot of valuable information from this session. First of all, I would like to remind you that please you keep your questions for the end of the presentations when all speakers have finished, so we can answer individual questions and forward them to the relevant speaker. So tonight we will have 4 speakers. We will have first Dr. Mel Thornton of City Fertility, who is the medical director. We will also have Dr. João de Pinho, who is the fertility specialist at City Fertility. Then we will also have attorney Victoria Ferrara of Worldwide Surrogacy. And finally, we will have Ida Parisi, who is an attorney in Italy and specialist in family law. So without further delay, I would like to give the floor to Dr. Mel Thornton, who will start this presentation. Thank you very much, and I hope you enjoy it.
Thank you, Juan. Good evening, everyone. The important thing that we want to discuss today is your surrogacy journey. And the surrogacy journey involves the partnership between the IVF clinic and the surrogacy agencies. Tonight, what we want to focus on is what we do as an IVF center, such as screening your egg donor, screening your surrogate, as well as screening the sperm source and doing the IVF process, including creating embryos and transfer the embryos. So we're going to start off by talking about the egg donation process. And the most important part of your journey is making sure you select the correct egg donor. Okay. Here at CT Fertility, we have our own egg donor database. We have upwards of 200 donors in our database and about 150 to 180 active egg donors. And when you're looking at our egg donation database, it's important to understand there's 2 types of egg donors. One of them is anonymous, which means you know all the information about them. And then there's a non-anonymous or a known or directed egg donor, which means that you share information for both of you. At CT Fertility, we do have a lot of our egg donors who are anonymous, but they're willing to Skype with you or video conference or meet you in person at the time of the egg retrieval. Our donors here at CT Fertility undergo a very rigorous evaluation, which includes personal information such as their physical characteristics, their likes and dislikes, and their family health history, as well as childhood and adult photographs, which are available on our database. When we screen an egg donor, there are 2 important points that we want to focus on. The first is going to be their medical history. We're making sure that these women are young and healthy, that they don't have any types of major medical illnesses. We next then focus on their family history to make sure there is no underlying medical issues in the family that would preclude to a genetic abnormality in the offspring. And then we want to review all of her fertility testing and make sure she has an excellent egg reserve, which will give you the very best outcome to have a child. The testing that we do to make sure she has a good reserve of eggs are 2 important tests. One of them is a blood test called a hormone level or day 3 FSH, and another test called a AMH, which stands for an anti-Mullerian hormone. This allows us to assess her overall reserve of eggs to make sure she'd be a great candidate to donate eggs for you. When we're selecting our egg donor candidates, we're looking for someone who can produce upwards to 15 to 20 mature eggs. So it's very important that we do this rigorous evaluation to make sure they have a great egg reserve. And then we also do an ultrasound. What you see on your screen is an ultrasound picture of an ovary, and the little black circles that you see are what we call the follicles or the eggs. So we do an ultrasound screening as well as blood work to make sure they have a healthy reserve of eggs, which means that they'll make a good number of eggs, which can lead to a healthy child for you. The main important factors for our database here at CT Fertility is that all of our egg donors are screened ahead of time. And that means they've undergone psychological testing, they've undergone genetic testing, they've had a meeting with the genetic counselor to discuss their family genetic background. They've undergone their egg reserve testing. So once you select one of our egg donors from our database, what you'll see is that they're ready to cycle immediately. The difference between our egg donor database and other agencies that you may look into is that if you select a donor from an agency, she may be a great candidate, but we have to screen her first to make sure she does have a healthy reserve of eggs before she can cycle for you. So we're at CT Fertility. We've done all the work ahead of time, so once you choose the donor, you can feel confident that she's a good candidate for you. In addition to the rigorous medical background, they also screen for infectious disease screening. They get a full genetic panel, including cystic fibrosis, spinal muscular atrophy, and Fragile X. Next, I'd like to turn over to my esteemed colleague, Dr. DePino, who will talk to you about screening of the surrogate as well as the male screening.
Quickly, you'll need one good part, which is not only the egg donor, but also the surrogacy part or the surrogate. And we need to also evaluate and screen for the other counterpart, which is as important. We need to go and have an evaluation, both medical, and this constitutes not only a prolonged and extensive history. Usually the surrogates are going to come over here to our clinic and to have a completely screen. We want to know if they are doing well in their health, if they did well in their past, and if they're going to do well in their future for future pregnancies. Most of them will have already a pregnancy of their own, and we need to review if the pregnancies that she had before, even for another surrogacy journey, have been all successful. We also want to make sure that there is no problems with the most important asset, not only that is going to be the location of the implantation, but the development of your pregnancy. And as you can see there on your picture, there is a small growth of a polyp, something that can be usually fixed very easily, but needs to be diagnosed. And we want to always take a look inside of any carrier's wound to see if there is any of such issues. On the male part, means on the intended parent part, it is also important for us to do some testing. Some of it is required by an institution that we have here in the United States. The Federal Drug Administration has a checklist that we need to provide. Not that is going to constitute as an impediment or a restriction for you not to be able to do this, such as are the infectious diseases. Many of our couples, for example, are HIV positive, and others will have positive for other infections, but we need to take a look, know in anticipation, and even for the restrictions that we need to apply in terms of our embryology lab, we need to do. Also, we need to take a collection of the sperm sample to make sure that that sperm sample is going to be valid and it doesn't constitute also a problem. Sometimes we have problems, and in that case, we often refer to a specialist called the urologist that will be able to maximize also that part. Many of our couples, if not the majority of them, will have a frozen sample that they can leave here with us even before they cycle with their donor. Means that you would have to come here to the clinic and leave a specimen. If it's a specimen that will be valid for your upcoming cycle. Now, Dr. Mel will talk a little bit more about the IVF process.
Excellent. The most important thing is that this journey can sometimes get a little confusing. So what we want to do is make it very simple for you. You always want to divide up into the egg donor and preparing the surrogate or the recipient of the embryos. So what you see on the screen is that this is an ultrasound picture of an egg donor, and the little black circles, once again, we call follicles, and ideally each follicle contains an egg. So we give this egg donor stimulating hormones to make her make multiple follicles or eggs. And at the same time, if we're doing a fresh cycle, we're giving the recipient mother or the surrogate hormones to build the lining of the uterus up to mimic a natural menstrual cycle. When you're doing a fresh cycle, it's really important that we have to have everything in synchrony. So typically, we want to make sure that the surrogate's lining is responding to the medications and that the egg donor is also responding to her medication, that everything lines up in a perfect state. Now, what happens is that the egg donor undergoes the retrieval, And then we have the sperm sample. And once again, like Dr. DePino mentioned, is that we do like to have the male partners come here to our clinic to give us a sperm sample so we can do a semen analysis to make sure you have an adequate sperm count as far as motility. We freeze that sample. And then what we do is that in nature, in order to get an egg to fertilize, you have to surround thousands and thousands of sperm around the egg. The problem with this type of fertilization is very inefficient. Fertilization rates, what we call natural insemination, is about 50%. Here at CT Fertility and other clinics throughout the United States, we do a procedure called intracytoplasmic sperm injection, or ICSI. And what that basically means is that we take one individual healthy sperm and we inject that sperm directly into the egg to allow us to have fertilization rates that approach about 80 to 85%, much more efficient compared to the natural portion. Now, this is just an example of what happens here is that we have these eggs here. You see there are 20 eggs. There were 20 eggs that were mature. And many times we have what we call a split sperm source. And that's when we have sperm from each male partner. And what you see is that we take 10 of the mature eggs and use it with one partner, and the other 10 use with the other partner doing the ICSI procedure to get the eggs to fertilize. Next, we come back and we want to see, well, how many of these eggs fertilize. And once we see how many are fertilized, we let them develop into what we call the embryo stage. And embryos are looked at on the third day. And on the third day, as you see the screen, they should be at a nice 6 to 8 cell stage. And then we let them grow to what's called the blastocyst stage, which is a stage where the embryo has the ability to implant. And that typically takes 5 or 6 days to occur. At that point in time on the screen that you can see here, there's a nice blastocyst on the screen. The blastocyst has cells become the trophectoderm, which the cells become the placenta, and then the inner cell mass of the cells that actually become the baby. So we assess the embryos on the 5th and 6th day to see how many healthy blastocysts we have. The embryos are graded, and then they're either transferred or frozen. And we'll talk about frozen embryo transfers in a second. Okay. So in this example here, you'll see that they have a good number of embryos. You see the grade. We see a lot of embryos that are A grade as well as B grade. The important thing about grading is that embryos that can lead to a pregnancy are only the ones that we freeze, and those are A grade or B grade. When we do the transfer, we like to select 1 or 2 of these very healthy A grade or B grade embryos and transfer them to the womb of the surrogate. The way we do the transfers is just like having in the United States, what we call a pap smear. We basically place a small catheter into her cervix, into her womb, and then we transfer the embryos directly into her womb using ultrasound guidance that you can see on the right-hand part of the screen. The 2 little white dots are the fluid that surrounds the 2 embryos that were transferred. And then once those embryos are transferred, approximately 10 to 12 days later, she comes back to her local monitoring facility or to her office, to the office here, and we confirm that she's pregnant with a blood pregnancy test. A couple things to mention here at CT Fertility. We offer lots of different types of packages that are available to help couples have the family of their dreams. One of these packages that we have is called a split donor egg cycle. And typically what that means is that if your donor makes 30 eggs, then 15 eggs are given to one couple and the other 15 are given to the other couple, considered a split cycle. And this is an example of what we see for a split cycle. The important thing about the split cycle is that it does lower the cost of the overall treatment, but it's only ideal for someone who has a single sperm source. It wouldn't be ideal for a 2 sperm source couple. And I'm going to turn it back over to Dr. DePino, who's going to talk about how many embryos do we actually transfer.
So the big question often enough is how many embryos can we transfer? Using an egg donor, we are going and setting ourselves up for a great success. And we have a limitation by the recommendations by several organizations, which say that the optimal number would be between 1, probably 1, or 2. We see that we used to transfer a lot more too. Reason being is that maybe with older processes more than 10 to 15 years ago, we would not be as successful, but we also would increase our number of twins in multi-gestationals. And now with one only single embryo transfer, we have another possibility, which is reducing that risk of multiples, means reducing the risk of twins. to about 1 or 2%. Even though that some of you might be wanted 2 embryos to be transferred, it's always good to anticipate and to know what are the risks that would motivate us to choose another path, which would be a single embryo transfer. We know that multiples or twins gestationals at least are at a higher risk for many things such as hypertension, diabetes in pregnancy, a lot of other problems like bleeding. We know that the cesarean sections rates are going to be actually higher, and also the pregnancy will be at an increased risk. And we see that premature labor, which is going to be one of the biggest threats for the baby, will be a young baby, sometimes too young to be born with all the development that it needs, with the need for an incubator, with need for increased attention and dedication from the intensive care unit, and that's usually not a good thing. Now, we know that single embryo transfers, and what this tries to demonstrate is that the more we transfer to, the more we'll have twins, which is about the rates that you see over there of twins on your right-hand side, which would be a third more comparing to the other side. Now, we see that on the red graph, what it just tries to demonstrate is that by increasing the number that we transfer there, we also increase the rate of complications. Now, here it's just, this rate, which is between 1% and 8% there that you see, and 5 to 18% that you see on prematurity rates. Now, the last question on the end of all of this is, why should we do a fresh cycle versus a frozen cycle or vice versa? There is many reasons why we are advocating much more for a frozen cycle than for a fresh. When I initiated my career about 15 to 20 years ago, where most of the things would be done fresh. The technology was not there. The freezing process is much more effective. We know that the increased pre-implantation rates and ongoing pregnancy rates, as well as live birth rates. Look at live birth rates as a baby that is born in the end of this whole process. There's also a decrease in miscarriage rates and a lower risk for preterm labor in healthy babies. This all comes about in the reasoning of synchronization. It's difficult sometimes to propose a fresh cycle in comparing to a frozen cycle. Since a fresh, you have to synchronize both parts of the egg donor and also of the gestational carrier. Gestational carrier needs to build up a lining, and the egg donor needs to have enough and good quality and best cycle available. There is always a difference between 1 or 2 days sometimes that we can maximize on the donor part, and the same thing can happen also on the gestational carrier. So it's that mismatch can lead us to risking a perfect egg donation cycle and also a perfect gestational carrier cycle. But more importantly is what we can bring over by a frozen cycle, which is the selection coming from PGS, which I will let Dr. Thornton explain a lot more about that.
Excellent. Thank you. So the final thing I'd like to discuss is an exciting developments in our field called pre-implantation genetic screening. You may hear that also called comprehensive chromosomal screening. Basically what it is that we sample small parts of these cells that become the placenta, and we look to see what the chromosome results are. Look to see if we have a normal set of chromosomes or abnormal set of chromosomes. And it's important that when you look at eggs, particularly in young, healthy egg donors, you would think that all the eggs should be nice and normal. But what you see when we do the genetic screening compare on our chart here, you can see that almost a third of the embryos that are created from these egg donors result in embryos that are abnormal, what we call aneuploidy, meaning they have an extra chromosome or not enough chromosomes. And that's important because those embryos that are abnormal don't implant or can lead to miscarriage, and more importantly, if you have an extra 21 chromosome, can lead to Down syndrome. So by doing the genetic screening, it's important that we can identify these certain genetic defects. So this is an example. What you see on the left-hand side, we take a few of the cells from the blastocyst. Only from the cells become the placenta. We do not touch the cells, become the actual baby. And the risk of damaging the embryo or complications of this is less than 1%. And this is what you see what's called next generation sequencing, which is the latest technology to assess the chromosomes. In this example, you can see everything is nice and straight on the green line. This is what a normal chromosomal embryo looks like. When we see abnormalities, what you're going to see is that we don't see that nice straight line. So this is someone that has less number of chromosomes as well as an extra amount of chromosomes. And this will be an embryo that's abnormal and we would not consider for transfer. So when we look at genetic screening of the embryos, the most important thing that it does, it allows for us to select the best embryo for transfer to give you the highest success rates. And here at CT Fertility, by doing the genetic screening in our laboratory, we're running success rates anywhere between 75 to 80% by doing selected embryo transfers. We reduce the likelihood of miscarriage as well as decrease the risk of an abnormal pregnancy. And this is why we're able to offer single embryo transfers and have the same success rates with a single embryo transfer that we would with a double embryo transfer. And then one last thing to finish on is some things that are also exciting here at CT Fertility that's cutting edge is something called mitochondrial testing. And the idea behind mitochondrial testing is that if an embryo has a too high of a level of mitochondria, it has a decrease in the ability to implant. So what we do is that we're trying to distinguish which embryo gives you the best chance of being successful. So these are embryos that under the microscope, they look normal. They've been tested genetically. We know that chromosomes are normal. Now we go one extra step to find out which embryo has the best likelihood by implanting by doing the mitochondrial testing. So you can see here, when you have an elevated mitochondria, as shown in the graph, your likelihood of implantation is less compared to if you have a normal amount of mitochondria. So Dr. DePino and I wanted to just give you an overview of the IVF process, what the IVF clinic does, and we're going to turn it back over to Juan so he can move on to the next step, which is also the surrogacy part.
Thank you very much indeed, Dr. Thornton, now to Dr. DePino. Next, I'm going to introduce Victoria Ferrara to you, who, as I said earlier, is the director and attorney at Worldwide Surrogacy in Connecticut. Thank you, Victoria, and over to you.
Thank you, Juan. I'm just wondering if, let's see if I can move the, here we go. Good evening, everyone. It's nice to be with you. I'm very happy to be participating in this surrogacy webinar. It was wonderful to hear Drs. Thornton and DePino talk about the IVF process. And now I can tell you what it would be like to work with a surrogacy agency here in the United States and to find a surrogate who lives in the United States to be able to carry your baby. So first of all, the name of our company is Worldwide Surrogacy Specialists. I am a lawyer here in the United States. I've been a lawyer for over 30 years, and I specialize and dedicate my work to assisted reproduction law. This is a picture of me, so you can see who I am. And the next slide, I want you to know that I handled the most important case in surrogacy in the state of Connecticut, which allowed for more favorable treatment of parents who are having children through surrogacy. We have a team of people here. Our main office is in Fairfield, Connecticut. I also have an office in New York. So if you come to the United States, we can meet in either one of our offices, and we would certainly want you to come to Connecticut where you could meet the other members of our team and get to know who would be helping you here in the United States. These are some pictures of our team. The first steps in thinking about having children through surrogacy, which you're doing now, is to gather information, come to a webinar like this, go to conferences, speak to people, and then eventually you need to choose your professional team. So you need an IVF clinic, such as CT Fertility, and you need a surrogacy agency that will help you with the process from the beginning when you choose the agency through the birth of your baby and obtaining your birth certificate and passport. And then, of course, you need to plan for the financial commitment. I often say to people, the only drawback to surrogacy in the United States is the cost. It's very ethical here. It's legal. We can help you. We can make sure that you're named as the parents of the baby. but the cost is difficult, and we need for people to make plans for the financial commitment. Then again, I offer myself as a resource even before you sign up with us as your agency. If you have questions and would like to Skype with me personally or members of my team to discuss your questions and concerns, we are available to do that. And of course, we will discuss with you the fees and the program details. So in order to proceed, you need to have a surrogacy agency, and that will start the matching process. There are 3 phases to the surrogacy journey. The first phase is the matching phase. It takes us approximately 4 months to 8 months to find the proper surrogate for you. You will tell us a lot about yourselves, and we will get to know you, and then we are also getting to know the surrogates who apply with us, and we will eventually have surrogate profiles to show you so that you can choose a surrogate. The second phase, before I get to this slide, the second phase would be the medical phase. That's after you have your surrogate, and then your surrogate goes to the clinic and is screened and examined, and then we go toward the embryo transfer, and eventually there is a pregnancy, and that's the third phase, is the pregnancy phase. In order to start with our agency, there are a couple of documents to look at. One is the intended parent profile or questionnaire, which you have to complete, and that is how we get to know you, besides talking and having a Skype or something like that. The second is the retainer. That would be the contract between you as the parents and us as your professional team. And then we ask for the first half of the agency fee to be paid up front. So the first payment would be $12,000. The next step then would be selecting your surrogate. So again, 4 to 6 months. In rare occasions, it's over 6 months. And we keep in touch with you. You would have a case manager here at the agency, and she would keep in touch with you while the search is going on to let you know how it's going and to eventually let you know about the candidates that we have who could possibly become your surrogate. This is one of our surrogates. I show this picture because many people ask what kinds of women become surrogates, and as you can see, Lisa here is a lovely young woman. The people who become surrogates are really wonderful people. They are happy to help you have your baby. Yes, they would like to make a little bit of extra money, but more importantly, across the board, in general, women who become surrogates want to help you. They want to enjoy your joy of having a child. So they are very stable, sound, and we, of course, screen them to make sure that they are good people and trustworthy people to carry your baby and take care of your baby during the pregnancy. Here's what we do to make sure that the surrogates are sound and stable. We do a background check of the surrogate candidate and her husband if she is married. That's an investigation that will tell us information about whether there's any criminal records in her background, even as much as parking tickets, where she's lived, how often she's moved, and certain things about her social media accounts. Then, importantly, we do a full psychological examination of her and, again, her husband if she's married. We have a social worker on our staff who does a screening to ask her about her lifestyle and her family and her people in her life who will support her. And then we have a review by reproductive physicians such as either Dr. Thornton or Dr. Tapino of her medical records from her pregnancies. And all of this is done prior to the match being made so that we can make sure a very high likelihood of success with this surrogate once you choose her as your surrogate. While you're waiting for your surrogate, these are important things that you can do. First, you'll decide how you're going to create your embryos. Will it be with using an egg donor, or will you be using your own egg and sperm? Do you know someone who will be your egg donor? Who will contribute the sperm? Of course, if it's a gay couple, perhaps both fathers will make the embryos. And then again, do you need an egg donor, and where will that egg donor come from, I often recommend that the first place to look for your egg donor is at your medical clinic, because as the doctor said earlier, they do a great deal of really good screening of the egg donors to make sure that they are qualified and healthy. Again, you'll discuss your medical options with your reproductive physician. Let's talk a little bit about the fees and the expenses. Before I get to this slide, I'll talk more globally about the fees and expenses. First of all, in total, without considering the medical clinic fees, in total on our side, the surrogate compensation, the agency, and also the legal, you have to plan for approximately $80,000. That breaks down to a few components. The first being the agency fee, which is $24,000. The second is the surrogate compensation, which is the biggest part of this process on our end, and that would be about $35,000 to $45,000 for the surrogate, and then your legal fees, which will be under $10,000. So that's the general breakdown of fees. But here, we're just going to show you what's going to happen after you have your surrogate. After you're matched with your surrogate and that is confirmed, you'll pay the second half of the agency fee of $12,000, and you'll put $10,000 into an escrow account. That is your money, and it will be used to start to pay the fees of the surrogate and the legal fees. And then you can see a breakdown of the initial legal fees, which is for your contract with the surrogate and her lawyer. We have a detailed sheet of expenses to show you, which we can send to you by email, and that will break this down and show you the itemized list of expenses. But here again is the general breakdown: the agency of $24,000, the medical with the egg donor, and this will vary depending on the plan you choose with a clinic like CT Fertility, the surrogate compensation, there are extra items that go into the contract, and then the legal, which can be approximately $8,000 to $10,000. So you can see at the bottom of the page, approximate range of total costs, maybe $120,000. $150,000 is high. That would be if unforeseen things happened and you would need additional insurance or something like that. Again, the range, why the range in the expenses, the variables are the surrogate compensation, the surrogate extra compensation, medical expenses, and insurance. How are we with time? So here's the big topic for especially international clients coming to the United States for surrogacy. Will my surrogate have medical insurance? And then the next question after that is, how will I insure my baby? As far as the medical insurance for the pregnancy, there are options. The best and first option is that the surrogate has insurance which will cover the pregnancy and has no exclusion for surrogacy. The second is there may be an exclusion, and we will guide you in purchasing a backup plan of insurance, a secondary insurance plan. And the third is if the surrogate does not have insurance, but you like her, and we need to figure out a plan of insurance. And we've often done that through the Affordable Health Care Act here in the United States, also called Obamacare. Now we're going to have a change in that plan. We'll have something called the American Health Care Act, most likely under President Trump, and we will look to that plan to be able to get insurance. Insurance is a complicated matter, and we have to discuss it in depth. So once you're ready to have a more detailed conversation about the surrogacy process, we can Skype and talk more in detail about various insurance details and issues that could come up. Here's a picture of our Connecticut office. We also have an office in New York, which this is a picture of our lobby area in New York. And lastly, I'll tell you that we journey with you. And one of the things that distinguishes our agency from, I think, from other agencies is how attentive we are to you and how much our team is responsible to help you through the process. I do pride myself on staying very available to you. Our clients have my cell phone, email, and also we have a team of people here dedicated to helping you with understanding the financial transactions, understanding your surrogate and who she is, and any questions you have about her as you're deciding to work with your surrogate. And also we have people to help you with the billing process as medical billing comes through, and we can explain those things to you. Let's talk a little bit about the legal process. There's different factors of legalities that we have to manage. The first is your contract with the surrogate, and I, as the lawyer here on the team, can help you with that contract. Your surrogate will have her own lawyer, and I will work with that lawyer to negotiate a good and fair contract for you as the parents. The contract will cover certain things, important things like, whether or not there would be a termination of the pregnancy if there's a defect in the pregnancy. And that, of course, is something we want the parents to have the choice of. And so we have to find a surrogate who would agree with that. And that's part of our matchmaking process in terms of you having the right surrogate. The contract is negotiated and it's put in place, and then once we have that, then the surrogate would go to your medical clinic and start the medical process. Another very important legal aspect of the process is how you become parents. And during the pregnancy, we will make sure that you have a lawyer. If it's in Connecticut, it can be me. If it's in another state, we will make sure that you have a lawyer who will be able to establish you as the legal parents of the baby when the baby's born. So sometimes parents come to me and say, how do I know that the surrogate won't keep my baby? Well, the number one answer to that question is the screening of the surrogate, so that we make sure she is committed to you, she's stable, she's sound, she's going to do the surrogacy pregnancy for the right reasons and be a good surrogate for the parents. The second way that we can protect you, very importantly, is in the legal process, and that is during the pregnancy when we can establish you to be the legal parents of the baby. So when the baby is born, the baby belongs to you legally, and you are recognized as the parents at the hospital, and you take the baby home or out of the hospital to wherever you're staying here in the United States. Then within a couple of days after the birth, you'll receive a birth certificate with your two names on it. And then after the birth certificate, we will guide you in getting your passport. Your baby will be an American citizen. You will get a United States passport, and that can be done within a few days to a week. As long as you have the birth certificate, you can go to a regional passport office and get a passport within a day or two. And then when the baby's healthy and ready to fly, you can travel home to Italy, and you've completed your process and you begin your family life at home in Italy. We've had Italian clients come to us and have babies through our program, and it's gone very smooth and it's gone very well, and they are safe and sound home in their homes in Italy. So it's certainly doable. We actually handle many international clients from other countries in Europe as well. And the main issues are the insurance for the newborn. That's one of the hardest issues for international clients, but we do manage that for you and help you with it. And then, of course, establishing your baby's citizenship in Italy, and that would be with the help of your lawyer in Italy. And we're fortunate to have Attorney Parisi here to discuss the legalities in Italy with you. I think that is all I have for now, and I'd be happy to entertain questions later on, or certainly after this webinar. If you'd like to contact me and discuss questions, I'm happy to be a resource with you.
Thank you very much, Victoria, for your lovely intervention. And yes, we will make sure that all participants receive the contact details in case they have additional questions later on. And last but not least, we have attorney Ida Parisi, who is going to give you some information about the legalities for Italian parents. And thank you, Ida, over to you.
Good evening, everyone. I would like to thank you for having invited me to take part to this webinar. This is obviously on very important aspects that have to do with MAP. First of all, I will be talking about the ways that the parental status can be recognized, but starting from the law that regulates MAP in Italy, Law 40, passed in 2004. In Italy, the law has been various judges have imposed bans, but many of these have been overturned. So now in Italy you can access to the following MAP techniques in Italy too. These are heterologous assisted fertilization techniques, preimplantation genetic diagnosis, fertile couples with genetic diseases can access MAP techniques, and cryopreservation of embryos not transferred. Therefore, it would be the doctor would consider the amount of embryos that it's suitable to transfer. Some of the bans currently existing are ban on the use of embryos for scientific research and ban on the application of surrogacy techniques. And these are the techniques that we have just heard about. Specifically, it's Article 12 that determines a ban to surrogacy in Italy. This is a real crime that can be punished with imprisonment from 3 months to 2 years and a fine from 600,000 to €1 million. It's quite useful to know, however, that in Italy there isn't a law that forbids Italians to go abroad to follow any such procedure. So therefore this has fed into the so-called reproductive tourism throughout the years. That is, many Italians that have traveled abroad to follow these procedures. These Italians have decided to do it abroad in a country where it was accepted by law. For everyone that decides to follow this path abroad, there are a series of points that need to be cleared and considered even before the journey is undertaken. For instance, these will be defined, for instance, by the relationship between the foreign and the Italian lawyers. These 4 themes are the most important ones: declaration of parenthood in favor of those resorting to these practices, issuing the American birth certificate, so how this will have to be issued, obtaining the minor's citizenship and travel documents, and these will be needed in order to allow the minor to come back to Italy with the parents, and registering the American birth certificate in the Italian Register of Births and Deaths. If we start from the first point, recognizing the parental status acquired abroad, we can see that the Italian law does not automatically recognize international parents as legal parents, and therefore you need to initiate a procedure of recognition. We know the Italian law does not recognize them automatically, and according to cases, you may need to initiate a recognition procedure. Over this will depend upon the various cases, and especially will depend on the various subjective criteria that characterize the couple. You will have different situations for heterosexual couples as opposed to homosexual couples. As far as issuing the American birth certificate is concerned, we can see that, as I was saying, even the birth certificate will have to be issued in a different way, depending on whether we're talking about a heterosexual couple, a single person, or a gay couple resorting to this procedure abroad. Specifically, what do heterosexual couples need to do? Both parents will have to appear on the birth certificate without any other reference. Singles, only the genetic parent will appear on the birth certificate. So in the case of a single man, the most popular option, it would only be this person to appear on the birth certificate. For same-sex couples, the same principle will apply. The same principle that applies in the case of single parents will apply. So only the genetic parent will appear on the American birth certificate. However, once the parents have come back to Italy, they may initiate a recognition process for the other parent, the other dad, father or mother, according to the situation. In the case of twins, there are slightly different criteria that apply. Normally, in case of twins, same-sex couples decide to use the same gametes that only come from one parent. This means that the children are genetically linked to the same parent. So each of the children is genetically linked to only one of the parents. However, at the same time, it may well happen that the child is genetically linked to one out of the two parents. So, for instance, child A will be linked to Mr. A, and child B will be linked to Mr. B. Let's move on. In this case, we say that we would have to have different assessments and follow different paths once the couple have come back to Italy, if we are talking about mixed couples with double citizenships who are resident in Italy or abroad. For instance, if they are registered in the Register of Italians living abroad. It is advisable to turn to an Italian lawyer and to a lawyer from the country whose other citizenship the couple holds. This will help to understand how to face the various legal implications in the two jurisdictions. As far as the minor citizenship and travel documents, as I was saying, any children born in the US will have double citizenship, so they will have an American citizenship based on the use solely, the right of the soil. Therefore, the child will obtain an American passport, but the child will also have an American citizenship based on the jus sanguinis, the right of the blood, because the US legislation will consider that child as born out of Italian parents. Therefore, formally, the Italian citizenship will only happen once the birth certificate is registered in Italy. We will see that the American passport can be obtained through the help of an US lawyer. As far as registering the actual birth certificate, that is the procedure to follow once you have the American birth certificate and the American passport. What do you need to do? What steps do you need to follow in order to register this certificate in Italy? In order to register this birth certificate in Italy, this will have to be certified and translated. The registration will then have to be asked directly at the Italian council of the city where the couple is residing. Should the mother or the father be registered in two different municipalities, one will have to be elected. Normally it's the one where the mother resides. Once the couple approaches the municipality to register the foreign birth certificate, one of the most asked questions is whether the person working in this office can refuse to register the certificate. This cannot happen unless this person has grounds to believe it is contrary to public policy. However, if this person can only do it once, he or she writes down the reasons whereby he or she is denying to register this birth certificate. When we look at the way the Italian law system looks at it, many of you will have heard of the various sentences that have been passed. Various judges are very positive towards recognizing same-sex couples, for instance, and parenthood granted on a genetic basis. In the past, however, judges have ruled that pursuing surrogacy abroad is a criminal offence. Therefore, which ones were the crimes that have been ascribed in these cases? These two crimes are the ones covered by the 495 article in the Penal Code. Often, once people went to an embassy asking to register a birth certificate, these came with a declaration from the couple where it stated that these were the parents of the minor. And by asking the certificate to be registered, they were declaring something which is false. When you ask to register a birth certificate where the mother in the couple that did not give birth to the child is indicated as the mother, according to Italian law, this equals to lying about the status of the child. This is because, according to Italian law, only the mother who gave birth to the child can be legally considered as the real mother. Therefore, however, this criminal relevance for this activity was often overlooked by judges when it was in compliance with the lex loci, that is the local law where this path was started, when the minor's interests and well-being needed to be protected, but also when the minor was genetically linked to both parents. So it's quite important that there is a genetic link of the minor with the two parents, or at least with one out of the two. This concludes my presentation. Thank you very much for your attention, and you can contact me by email. You find my contact details on here, and I'll be happy to answer to your questions or to clarify any doubts that you may have, because I understand that this is quite technical. It's a very specific topic. I will therefore be happy to give you my help. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ida, for your instructive presentation. And I would like to ask the audience if anybody has any question. They can write in the chat box now the question, and I will pass it on to the relevant speaker. Or otherwise, I will be sending you all the contact emails and phone numbers so that you can ask them also directly via email or via phone. Okay, so I see yes, so I see that we have no questions in this moment, so I will be sending you the contact information of the three speakers, and I would like to thank you very much for joining us tonight. I hope you enjoyed it and you found it very helpful. And okay, so I have, sorry, one last request to intervene from Dr. Merrill Thornton, so I'm going to give him the floor for one moment. Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you. Juan, looks like there is the risk of PGS. And what that was saying is that the risk of damaging the embryo is less than 1%, particularly in embryos that are resulting from young, healthy eggs. The typical risk of PGS that you see is in women who are using their eggs when they're older. The embryos are less viable, so there's a chance of damage in that situation. But using eggs from egg donors, the risk of damaging with the biopsy and the testing is unheard of, and we always say less than 1%.
Thank you for that, Dr. Thornton. I see that Giulietta is understood your answer. So I would like to ask the participants if they have any more questions to please write them now on the chat box. No. Otherwise, well, I would like to thank you all very much for your great interventions tonight and for your participation. And I will be contacting you shortly with some contact information for. Okay, sorry. So then we have another question from Giulietta. If the passport is US, why do you mention the consulate? So is this question for Ida? Okay. So I'm going to give the floor to Ida so she can answer that question. Thank you, Ida.
So I mentioned the consulate just because, according to Italian law, to issue a birth certificate, a foreign birth certificate, there are two alternatives. You can either go to the Italian embassy in the United States, or you can either go to the Italian municipality, so in Italy. Normally, it's better to go directly to the Italian municipality to shorten the times of the issuing the birth certificate. So for this reason, you can travel with the American passport, with the US passport. After obtaining the American birth certificate with the name of the legal parents, you will have the US passport, and you will go back to Italy. And once you go back to Italy, you can go to your municipality, the municipality in which you reside, and you will ask to transcribe, to issue the birth certificate. But this certificate has to be certified and translated.
Thank you very much, Ida, for that. We have another question from Jay. I would like to remind you, sorry for the translators to be able to interpret in the right direction. Probably you were doing this right, but just to reiterate that if you are speaking in the Italian channel, you should speak in Italian, and whoever is on the English channel, you have to speak in English, and then it will be translated into the other language. So, Ida, there's another question for you over here from Jay. He says he's American and his wife is Italian. So once they have the US passport and birth certificates, is it going to be easier to register the child as an Italian citizen too? So over to you, Ida. Thank you.
So once obtain the American passport, the child will be American because it will be born on the American soil. You can obtain the Italian citizenship just once. The birth certificate will be transcribed, will be issued in the municipality in which the Italian parent is residing. And in that case, they can keep both citizenships because a citizen can have both the Italian and the American passport. This is because both states allows to have a double citizenship.
Thank you very much, Ida. And there's another question for you from Giulietta. She's saying that they are not married, and would that be a problem to get recognition for the non-genetic parent? So over to you again, Ida. Thank you.
Del certificato. The fact that you're not married doesn't have any implications either for the Italian or the American law. Since one of you is not the genetic parent, doesn't have any importance in the American law because they are both recognized as the legal parents. In Italy, you might have some problems just because issuing a birth certificate declaring that the child is born from that mother who's not genetically linked to that child can be considered as a crime. However, the Italian law is starting to recognize the level and the value of the legal parentage. So there's no a very clear answer to this, but this could generate some problems after asking for the issuing of the birth certificate. It is important to evaluate it case by case because it can vary.
That's great. Thank you very much for that, Ida. There's one medical question for our medical team in City Fertility from Jay. He's saying his wife, who is 31, has the Rokitansky syndrome. So viable eggs, but underdeveloped uterus. Is it possible to still harvest her eggs?
The question.
I'm sorry, yes, I will repeat. From Jay, medical question. So his wife is 31. She has the Rokitansky syndrome, so she has viable eggs, but underdeveloped uterus. And he would like to know if it's still possible to harvest her eggs. Thank you.
I didn't hear the first part. Actually, very interesting that one of the things that I've done a lot, and we do a lot over here, and we've dedicated also a lot, is to women that were born without uterus, as such is the case. Very possible. We have a number, most of our women that seek us out are in their early age. She is 31, so she is very young. And she will be able to do probably very well in a cycle of stimulation. We have to be very cautious is only with preparing for the retrieval of the eggs. The reason being is that sometimes the uterus is relocated, but other organs in the belly are also relocated. And the retrieval can be a little bit more difficult to do because of that fact. There's several techniques that we've used over here, and we are one of the few clinics that actually, in very rare circumstances, we would be able to do even an abdominal retrieval if that would be the case. But it's something simple. It will need, of course, a gestational carrier in place eventually, and the creation of embryos is generally pretty seamless. The stimulation protocol is often done between Italy and between Italy and the United States. And it's pretty seamless. The medication, I was going to say I'm originally from Portugal, and the medications are also the same. So it's something that we do and very often, and we would very much be prepared to do such a process. If you have any more questions, please at any time seek us out, and either me or Dr. Thornton, and we'll be able to answer a little bit more questions if you want.
Thank you very much, Dr. De Pino. We have another question from Giulietta, who is asking Ida if it would be better to go for a single parent certificate. So over to you, Ida.
Genitore single. So if you have a birth certificate with a single parent, so maybe only the father, the genetic father, this would imply, this wouldn't imply the recognition of the child from the mother's side. So the mum wouldn't recognize the maternity of this child. But we can look at other options, and the mum could think about adopting the child. But even in this case, this has to be assessed case by case because we have different options. I would say that there are very, very reduced risks issuing a certificate containing the name of the mum, even though she's not genetically linked, because now Italy is moving forward, trying to recognize children that are not linked genetically to their parents. And also, according to the American law, the mum who's not genetically linked to the child, is recognized as a legal mum.
Thank you very much, Ida, for your answer. So I would like to give one more chance to write another question in the chat box. Otherwise, we will be also sending you a link to see this webinar again, which has been recorded for your convenience. So thank you very much, everyone, for your participation tonight, and wish you a lovely evening. Thank you. Bye-bye.